Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. I'm really excited. I have a new guest with me today. It's the first time for you on the podcast. I have Natalie McCabe. Welcome, Natalie. Thanks for being with me today.
Hi, how are you?
It's so good to have you. Okay, so I'm going to give you a brief intro and then I'm going to let you tell us more about yourself. So, you and I connected on Facebook on one of the podcast Facebook groups, and we were talking offline before we hit the record button and realized that so much of what you and I do and what we're passionate about really aligns beautifully. So we've already planned out like our next 3 or 4 episodes that we want to record about. So you are a parenting coach and you used to be a teacher for 30 plus years, and you really took everything that you used to do and everything that you needed in your life and basically created services that you wish you would have had for yourself. So I'm going to hand it over to you. Tell us, and I know there's a lot there the lot that you've done. So walk us through what you do, how you got here, and then we'll jump into our topic.
All right. Well, so I'll start out where I am and then I'll back it up. How's that? Go
Perfect.
in reverse. I've started coaching parents. My niche is for co-parents that are struggling with communication and their parenting, where the child is going back and forth to homes. The reason I chose that niche is because I've been co-parenting and as a single parent for 16 years. So it was kind of a good fit that I can understand the people that I'm working with. And it's been quite successful so far and working with parents separately in different meetings, but eventually getting them to a point where they can agree on some things and their improvement in communication is that gradually getting better and better. So super pleased with that. But years ago, I started a after school program because I was a single mother and didn't have any childcare. So that has grown from 20 families to 75 families and with a waiting list. And it was wonderful to have my own children with me every day when they were young after school. Um, I also started a little kinder music business, music and movement, dancing and singing with babies. That lasted about six
Wow.
years. That was the most fun. That was the most fun job. It was like a drug, singing and dancing with babies and toddlers. And what I loved about the kinder music program, I mean, I could do a commercial for them. Every one of their activities is based on early child brain development, which is a
Mm.
huge interest of mine, which gave me the idea to start to write my book years ago. Because that's such a huge component that I don't think parents are aware that from the age of in utero up to age 7, how impressionable our children's brains are and how they soak in all this information, right? So that helped me to teaching school for 30 years. And then I realized, okay, it's time. I've been helping children now for years and years, and I love the children, but I felt like I could make a bigger impact helping parents that will also help the children. So
Yeah, I love that. And you and I were talking about how, in both of our previous jobs, well, because you, okay, actually tell us real quick, you were a teacher before that. So tell us
yes.
about that.
Elementary school teacher. I mean, basically, I'm an entertainer at this point, right? Because I have to get the kids, with their attention, and I really loved having that cohesive group and, designing the lessons for all the different learning types and having fun. Actually, so my last year teaching a couple of years ago, I had a grade 4 or 5 split class, and guess what they all did? Their own podcasts.
Wow, that's
Because I
cool.
was I was teaching the literacy part of I was only 50% position, because I have the other business. And I thought, okay, literacy, reading, writing, listening, speaking. What's going to hit
Mm.
all those curriculum outcomes? I think a podcast would work really well. And they were so excited about it. Kids need to be excited and internally motivated to want to learn things. And so I really love that part of my job, to get that excitement into them by thinking of creative ways to teach things, right?
Yep.
Not just your basic, let's write some paragraphs on an animal and, put together
Yeah.
a PowerPoint on, Google Slides. No, we're going to record a podcast. I had a guy come in with the microphones. Literally, we
Wow.
built a little podcast studio in a closet in the school. Like the kids were so excited to set up blankets and
I
you know,
love that.
yeah,
That's
it was
so
so much
great. And
fun.
what I think about when you say that, like, I think it's that extra step that it takes for us with kids is knowing that they crave more than just what traditionally is given to them. And in the kids that connect best with teachers. It's with the teachers that really are the more like creative and the ones that do go the extra mile to try to get to that level, and just find that piece of the kid and just pull it out and be like, okay, let's nurture this. And I love it because
Yeah.
your passion, and to be a teacher, I think you gotta love it. Like I could never do it. I could never do it. Um, and so I have so much respect for teachers because you do have to you have to have a desire to be with children and to help children. And I think that that's so beautiful that you were able to do that and then turn that into these other businesses where you still work with kids. And what I love, oh my gosh, did I lose you?
No,
Can you
I'm
still
here.
hear me? Okay, your picture is just
Yep.
frozen, but we're still
Oh,
we're still our sound is still going. Okay, hopefully it fixes itself. Um, okay, so what I was saying is kind of what I love about your kind of the next steps is what brought you to this parenting piece. And you and I were talking before we hit the record button about how when we work with kids, one of the hardest parts, because you worked with kids as a teacher and then these other things, and then I worked with kids in therapy, but we, at the end of the day, we do all the work that we do, and then the kids go home. The kids go back to their parents or whatever, their caregivers, and whatever is happening in that home, whether it's the environment or the relationships, that then kind of sometimes complements what we've worked on with the children, and sometimes it kind of, I don't know, it takes us a little off track.
you're
So
being kind.
I love that you went to the source. And I was telling you, a lot of therapists that my peers don't work with kids because of that, because it is so hard to do all this work with the kids, see progress, and then unfortunately steps are taken backwards with the child if the parents aren't reinforcing the good work and aren't healthy, in whatever way.
Mhm. Yeah.
So for a lot of therapists, they don't want to do it because it's too much. So for you, you're like, I'm just going to go work with these parents. I'm going to help
That's
them
right.
because yeah. So tell me a little bit about how you kind of got or I guess started working with co-parenting. So you had your own experience of going through the divorce and having to co-parent. So walk me through kind of that journey for you.
Oh, wow. My children were quite young, and it was very difficult at first. There was not a lot of communication. My ex-husband worked away at sea, 30 days on, 30 days off. So that made, communication difficult because he was away. And then I moved home to my small hometown rather than stay in we were in his small hometown, but his parents were elderly, couldn't help me with the kids. I didn't have any parents to help me with the kids. So instead of moving to a big city and try to go back to substitute teaching with a 3-year-old and a 18-month-old and no childcare, I was like, okay, let me just go home to my little tiny town. So I did that, and gradually our communication would get better. And I did a lot of work to make sure that he would see them 3 to 4 times a year for 16 years because of his work and other things. So this is an interesting story. So one of the things I used to do, it was kind of cathartic for me a week before they would be going on a week-long trip with them, and they were so young, like, right? I would sit down, and I still have the actual journal. I would write in the journal everything about their schedule, funny things they were saying, funny things they were doing, what their favorite foods were to eat. Like just this whole everything in my heart and soul, right? I dumped in this little journal to send because it was so important for me for him to know kind of who these little people are, because when kids are young, they change constantly change, and sometimes it'd be 3 months or whatever before he would see them again. So but then I realized, at that point there was still heat and the past and things. And, unfortunately at that time, he took that, me sending the journal, as me telling him how to parent.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But that wasn't at all what it was meant for. It was just to share who these little people are.
Mm.
But I mean, I'm happy to say that the journal is helping my clients.
Wow.
That they get to when they for young children. So I've created a journal for like zero ages baby to 4 years old, and then another one for like school age kids. The teenager one has yet to be created, because that's
Yeah.
quite a bit more complicated. Uh,
Maybe the kid needs to write it themselves.
Yes, and
What?
there are journals out there where kids
Mhm.
that are in two different homes do write the things. But my thing was about this communication. So, over the years, my ex-husband and I, we were able to talk. I don't know. I can't even tell you how, what the day it happened, or can't even put a finger on it. But it wasn't long after those initial year or two that we started to become friends. We're chit chatting. His girlfriend and him stayed at my house, right? Like, we
Wow.
drank wine and talked about how are we going to survive teenagers. Like, we had a great time, you
I
know?
love that.
So it's the ebb and the flow of, but a big part of it was the understanding of each other and having compassion. That's where it all began. I mean, we're both given our 100%, but I need to be compassionate that maybe his 100% didn't feel like my 100%. Do you know what I mean? But how
Hmm.
can I, and it was a counselor therapist that said to me, so Natalie, you can't expect his 100% to be the same as yours. Like, you can't expect a fish to climb a tree. These are his skills. He's doing the best he can. And, that was a huge wake up moment for me. Like, yeah, why can I be angry? He's giving everything he can, right? So,
Hmm.
but I mean, parents that are in this heated place, that's what I try to help them with: compassion, see the other person, see their other, how what their parenting style is, let's say, or what their communication style is, and how to kind of navigate that so they can get the information about the child that they need and want to get.
Yeah.
It's not all about them being best friends and, going for dinner once a week. Maybe that is possible, right? But my ex-husband and I did that. But it's really for the benefit of the child that the parents are calm and having some good communication that isn't, you know, anger towards each other, or absolutely never speaking badly about the other parent in front of the
Hmm.
children.
And I
That's
think one of the most one of the most encouraging parts of your story is that it didn't start out easy, and I think some parents are like, oh, well, you guys got along, so it was easy. No, you did not. And
mm-mm,
you had to cultivate that because you knew that that was what was best for the children. And neither of you were going to be where you wanted to be as a parent if you had this animosity with the child's other parent, and it sounds
mm-mm,
like you just got to a point where you realize this isn't about us. Obviously, we have our issues. We got divorced for a reason. We probably don't like each other very much, but we can do this together respectfully and, like you said, with compassion. It doesn't have to be ugly, but that takes putting yourself aside and focusing on the goal, which is how do we do this in a way that's best for our children. And I,
yeah.
I really love that. And I'm gonna try to connect us because that, my audience is mostly married couples with children. And so they're in a very different stage than where you were when you had to learn how to co-parent. But a lot of what you see in helping divorced parents co-parent is stuff that we actually see in married homes, where there's a difference in parenting style. There's a difference in parenting energy, and there's a difference in how much we have to give to parenting, right? And so sometimes, I've had conversations with other guests about the primary, being the default parent and the primary parent, and talking about how in some households there's a clear distinction between, I'm the primary parent and you're the supporting parent, so to speak, but we all understand what that means and everyone's comfortable with their role. But then in most households, it's unspoken. There's a lot of resentment or a lot of just kind of silent frustration about, like, why am I doing more? Why aren't you doing more? And all of that. And so I think and that's part of why I was really excited about talking to you, is because you you've seen and you continue to work with couples who hit the breaking point and now they're trying to figure out how to work together when they're not married. And so it's like, how do we take that and say, okay, let's compare some of that to what's currently going on in marriage? What are some of the things that, if parents could just get over themselves, so to speak, all of us, right? Like, if I can accept that my way of parenting is not superior to my husband's, it's just
Mm-hmm.
different. If I can be, you know, if I can be better equipped to talk to my husband about how I maybe struggle with what he's doing as a parent. And maybe he has some things to tell me about how maybe I'm a little too uptight or whatever, right? So if we can have those conversations and if we can learn those skills, and your journal is so beautiful because, just because you live together doesn't mean you're both equally parenting and spending time with the kids. And so there's a lot of missed moments among parents in the same household. So I'm talking way too much, but you know where I'm going with this. So I'm
I
going
do.
to hand it over to you. What jumps out at you from that, where you want to go with it?
Well, definitely that feeling of that resentment that can build up over time. I mean, having gone through divorce, I mean, that is a huge factor that brings things to a breaking point. So I would first say to your audience, like, don't let that happen. If you're feeling that, then it's time to have a conversation about that in a calm and neutral way. Don't let it get to a point where it's not a nice conversation, where it's built up too much. And really being honest with yourself, you know, so you're in this role. If you feel like you're doing too much, then, is this exactly what you want and need? As far as your parenting role is. I mean, another thing I work hugely with my clients is the self-care piece, which I know is so important for all of us individuals. We need to look after our mental health, our physical health, our emotional health, and our spiritual health. Can we do all of that every day? No. However, it is one of the most important things, because in a marriage, you are still an individual. You still, you have the role of mother, of wife, of husband, of brother, but you as an individual, you don't want to lose yourself. I mean, that's something that I did do. I mean, here I am, a parent coach, school teacher, wrote a book. Never going to say I was a perfect parent or a perfect person. Absolutely not ever. That's probably one of the reasons I'm out here shouting my story from the rooftops, because I wasn't perfect. Hopefully people can relate. But yeah, I lost myself totally in the role of being a single mother, because there was no one else to help me. There was no one else. Couldn't even call someone up and say, pick up some milk on your way home, like nothing. So I took it on, and very resilient individual, and built businesses and did all of this. But as my children grew older, who's Natalie? What? I like literally, my son went to university and I'm like, I don't even know what I like to eat.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, because every meal I made was for them and what their taste and their schedule, and right. So it was a shocking kind of a whole other, time in my
Mm-hmm.
life. And so if I really want to impress on parents that it is not selfish to take care of yourself, and it's not just about the bubble baths and the fingers, or it's setting boundaries, it's learning to say no, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
taking some time to find out what was that passion you had when you were a kid. What was it you were doing that you lost track of time when you were a kid? Can you find a half hour a week to do that? Right? Sometimes it takes time, because we are overwhelmed as parents. Let's be real.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of time in the day or the night or the morning or the weekends. Like they
Mm-hmm.
just kind of all mishmash together. But really, that is the most priority, because that's giving a gift to your children. It's giving a gift to your relationship, first of all, to
Yeah.
keep it stronger. But it also is giving a gift to your children, because when your children see their parents, like, oh, my mom's not available to do that right now because she went to dinner with her girlfriends, because she does that, right? Or dad's gone for a golfing weekend because he does that to take care of his personal relationships and mental health, and et cetera, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it is
Yeah.
important. It's not selfish. You're bringing back, after you have experiences like that, you bring back more life to the family, which, as and I say this to a lot of my clients, is a family is a living system.
Yeah.
All the parts and pieces are constantly moving and morphing, and one effect to one piece of that system can positively affect the rest. And I see that
100%.
happen all the time.
Yeah. And it's even something as small as being in a grumpy mood, right? So if one
Yeah.
parent is just walking around the house in a really visible, annoyed mood, it's felt by everyone. It creates this tension. Everyone now is kind of uncomfortable or walking on eggshells. And I think that self-awareness is so important. And one of the hardest things about parenting is that you are always on. You don't get to just say, I don't feel like doing this today, so I'm just going to take a day off. And so that
Yeah.
is, it goes back, and you and I both agree on this, and I've said this before on my episodes. Um, I believe that all parents, kind of like you and I were saying, if you have to have a license to get a car, like you should have something before
Yeah.
you're allowed to parent, but that doesn't really exist. And so we're left with this, freedom to parent however we want, which is beautiful, but we don't know how to do it. And there isn't anyone really who takes us and says, listen, if you want to be a good parent, here's some things you need to remember. Like we don't learn that growing up as children, as young adults. And so we're having to figure it out. But then you bring this other individual that you're co-parenting with in your same home, and they were raised differently. Their family background is different. And now you're trying to figure out how to do it in a way that you're both aligned on, how to take in your own, whether it's mental health struggles or just, physical exhaustion or just mood, and try to combine all that while you have a child who might be screaming. Like it's just
Like
a whole
it's
thing. And yeah,
huge.
it
It's
doesn't it
huge.
doesn't stop. And so, I think a good piece of the puzzle is the partnership, right? So if my partner and I, my spouse and I, care about the other person's self-care, then we're providing support like, hey, when was the last time you went out with your friends? When was the last time you played your video game? When was the last time you went on a walk? When was the last time you whatever? And so it's remembering that we also, we play a role in nurturing each other. And unfortunately, so much of what happens is that we get stuck in how we're unhappy and what we're not getting, that we forget that we can never stop being in a partnership. And then it's like, well, I don't want to. He doesn't do it for me. Why should I? What do you think?
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. Like, but it's important that that is expressed, that you can't just be walking around saying, well, he should see that the dishes are that. Listen, some people just don't see that stuff, dude. Like it's like the fish climbing the tree. Like you can't expect them to see things the same out of your lens. Yes, you're in the same house. Yes, you're in the same room. And yes, you may think, oh my gosh, I can't believe how somebody can't see that. Right. Like, but they don't. So, when you have that kind and compassionate approach to sit down and say, listen, these are some things that are making me feel, here's what I need. Right. And then because the other person doesn't know what you need until you tell them. Like we haven't gotten to the telepathic psychic communication yet on this planet, right?
Darn.
I
Yeah.
know, I know. Apparently, it's coming. But so that strength in communication for partners to stay together. I mean, it's a skill. It has to be practiced, and you have to take your own stuff. You know, figure out where your own stuff is coming from. Like, where is this reaction coming from that I always react this way whenever this happens?
Mhm.
That just noticing and being aware, because when you're aware of things, then you can change them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And give
But
that more
it's
support to your partner.
Yeah, and it's ongoing awareness, right? Like, and you and I
Oh yeah.
talked before we hit the record button that this is why, I'm a therapist, but when it comes to this stuff, I believe heavily in a different approach of coaching because it's very different. The support you get in therapy and coaching can seem very similar, and it is in a lot of ways, but the outcome is very different. So why don't you kind of share with us your
Yeah.
perspective on that difference?
I do talk a lot about what parent coaching is not, because I sometimes feel like with a business coach and a life coach, people get it. But people hear parent coach and they go, oh, are they just going to tell me what to do and tell me how
Mhm.
to parent? And that is so not it. I do not tell anybody what to do. It's based on positive psychology. We take the parent from where they are, building on their strengths, and take them where they want to go. We build that dream, that positive, forward looking future. Whereas we said therapy and counseling is great, it is necessary with some people, and it's awesome, but it goes backwards. It goes to the history, to the root, to dig up the root. I'm not saying it's not important to dig up roots, it is.
Yeah.
But for coaching, for clients that don't necessarily need therapy, that we take them and build this positive vision of the future and take in all the living systems of the family and talk about their own self-care, their professional life. I mean, take in all aspects of the whole person. I do that with my clients, the whole person. I want to know how work is going, because living systems, that something at work might be affecting this parent, how they're parenting this child. Like, you don't know. So it's my job to ask all those appreciative inquiry questions to kind of get to the root, find out, okay, where's the life in this system, and where can we might not need to bring some of that light to this area to help them get through the struggle. And my hope is that after the client is finished with me, that they don't have to come back,
Mhm.
that they then know their strengths, they've built their confidence up, and they can look and take any sort of struggles that comes forward. They'll have some strategies to deal with it. So
Yeah, I love that. And obviously I believe in both because I do both. But from a therapy standpoint, I think, you had said earlier about like figuring out what it is you're feeling and why you're feeling it. That's where therapy comes in handy. And I think when an individual goes to therapy to work on some of their own hangups, whether it's anxiety about certain things, or just insecurities about certain things. I think there's so much beauty in understanding myself and what I need and how I can take care of myself better. But then coming together with my partner, with my spouse, to work on learning new strategies, learning techniques, because so much of what we do in marriage is try to solve a problem, right? Like, hey, I'm upset you did this. I want to talk about it. But if we don't know how to have that conversation, we don't understand, like, if we don't have the skills to speak clearly, speak respectfully, pick the right time, the right mood, the right tone, like if I can't bring the right skills to that situation, then of course it's not going to work. You don't bring a jackhammer to a project that just needs a little screwdriver. Like it's
yeah.
the wrong tool. And then we get really frustrated with why didn't that work? And you're not listening to me. Like it just explodes. And so what you do is you work really hard to teach those skills of first figure out what are you trying to say? Okay, let's
Mhm.
practice how you want to say that. What are the words, like if you know this is the goal, then here are the words you probably don't want to use because this other person gets really maybe triggered by that, or maybe that that's something that you can't talk about calmly. Maybe you need to write it out first. Maybe you need to organize your thoughts on paper. And then now, how do we use the kinds of words that will communicate confidence and strength, but respect? Like I am a nerd when it comes to teaching people how to advocate for themselves in strong yet very respectful words, because I've had to learn as a super sensitive, naive, kind of pushover in my younger days. I needed to learn how to be a strong advocate for myself, knowing that it's okay that I experience emotion. It's okay that my feelings get hurt, but I need to know how to be tough and be respectful. So, how do you guide couples or, post-divorce couples? What do we call them?
Co-parents. There's also
Co-parent?
a term now, parallel parenting, which
Yeah.
is even bigger, a separation where there's
Yeah.
zero communication. So yeah, I mean, I obviously my clients, we focus on their self-care, what makes what lights them up, what makes them feel good. So another thing I'll do is we do a parenting style survey, and with both, right? And these parenting styles were created by the lady that created my training course. Actually, her name is Gloria De Catano, and she's the founder of the Parent Coaching Institute,
Hmm.
and she started this back in 2001. And I got to tell you, it's a master's level course with 100 hours of practical
Wow.
coaching, and the resources are amazing. Like out of any parent coaching certification, because I researched them all because I'm a bit of a nerd, I got to give a shout out to the Parent Coaching Institute. If anyone is ever thinking about they want to do this, check out this
Hmm.
course because it's amazing. Anyway, so Gloria created these 4 parenting styles, and she's very clear on putting down what are the strengths of each parenting style and the challenges of each one, right? So it's not conscious parenting and helicopter parenting and those typical ones that you
Mm-hmm.
hear. She really goes into, so there's 4 of them: reason and expectation, personal guidance, practicality and results, care and nurture. So you can see that even with my parents that are separated and your parents that are still in the same home, there's not always the same parenting style. So if you have a mom that's real care and nurture type of style, that's what they put into everything they do, and then you have someone that's practicality and results. I want this done like this, that, right? So you can see how that's going to cause some issues. But what I've noticed with my clients is when they know that about the other parent, right, then there's it's easier to come to a balance in their communication. So then they understand that practicality and results are really important to this person. And for my clients right now, most of their communication is email or text, right? I encourage the email.
Mm-hmm.
And I help them write the emails if they want me to make sure that, they're getting across what they want to get across, and not kind of lighting any fires for the other side. Right. So those are kind of things that I help them with for sure. And with the journal, and, just the last email that I had 2 clients write to each other was, the title was just things I want you to know.
I love it.
Things I want
Yeah.
you to know about me and kind of where I am right now, because they hadn't communicated in over a year, right?
Mm. Yeah.
So,
Do you know what's really interesting about that is, yeah, when we hear someone talk, we can feel sometimes the brain just automatically filters it through our own experience. So as you're saying all of that, I'm thinking of all of that being applied to a married couple. I'm
mhm,
thinking of some of the couples that I work with in the therapy and in the coaching realm, and how they live in the same home and they don't communicate, and it's been months since they had a conversation that was not about the children, that was not about what's happening today, that was maybe about how I feel. And so everything you were saying, I'm like, oh my gosh, Natalie, like we can apply
yeah,
this to
absolutely.
a couple living together. And so these
Yes,
exercises can 100% be applied. The
yes,
journal, you know how like I've had kids and parents do journals with each other, where like the kid will write like how they're feeling to the mom or the dad, and they
mhm,
respond and they leave it in a safe space where no one else can see it. But I've had couples do that where it's like just have this space where you can talk, because writing it out, I sometimes encourage married couples like, look, you can't say this stuff to each other. You don't know how, you are not getting the whole like how to speak. Write it down,
mhm,
write it out, the first version, come back, edit it after a couple of days, maybe send it to me and I'll take a look at it. But communicate, because the point is to be able to communicate clearly. And if you have to do it in writing, there's no shame in that.
yeah.
It's just that's where your strength is, right? So what would we want if couples who are struggling are listening to this, and they're struggling in, maybe just how they parent, but just beyond that, just how they coexist, right? The way
Mhm.
they handle household stuff, the way they handle intimacy, the way they address emotional connection, all of that. What are some of the main strategies or tips that we could say, like, here's what you could implement to connect and communicate differently in your home? And it might be non-traditional, but it might work for you.
Well, first I'll say I do coach couples also
Good.
that are
Yay.
not split up, and any sort of issues or whatever. Yeah, the communication, it's so individual that I kind of I don't have kind of one sort of thing to drop in, because it it really depends on kind of where they are, right? I mean, I love your idea of the writing back and forth. The spending the time connecting is, however that may be, is if you connect best when you're driving in the car or going for a walk, it's scheduling that time just to be with each other and not necessarily have the big conversation at that time. And yourself, it also depends on the person's love language,
Yeah.
right? I mean, if a person loves gifts and the other person values service, well, right, you want to find something that first they have to understand that about each other.
Mhm.
Like there's so many intricacies. So it would definitely be on an individual basis
Yeah.
that I would have a couple there together. We definitely do the parenting styles, but for their connection, I have to have more information. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No,
Right?
absolutely. And so basically, I think what you're what you're saying also is that know yourself, right? You have to be able to come to the table with a basic understanding of what you want, what you need to be able to say, this is my goal. Okay. So if you're identifying your own goals and spouse is identifying their own goals, so now you need to listen. What is the other person needing out of this? Because again, we're so focused on what we want, what I want. I want you to listen to me. I want you to spend more time with me, whatever. But if the exercise focus was, I want to know what you need. I want to hear what your kind of struggles are, what you're not getting from me. But then I have to put my pride aside and not take that as a dig and not be
Not about
not
me.
yeah, I can't see this as, well, I can't do that because I don't have time and I'm the one that no, that's not what we're saying. We're saying listen to what they need. And it's not that you're not providing it, it's that they're not getting it. Okay. So now how do we just focus on each other? How do I hear what you need and just try to work on that? But I will only do that safely if I know that you are doing the same exercise. And so when you have a couple in front of you, that's why you start with self-care.
Yeah.
What is it that you need? What would help you feel better in the way that you take care of yourself and the way that you get taken care of? So we evaluate all these things. We talk about the parenting style, all of these things, but then the goal is, how does the other person support you? Like you support yourself, obviously, we're responsible for ourselves first, but then how do we kind of have this safe environment where we communicate about how do we help each other? And I, in my personal experience of, or professional experience with being a therapist, so much of the time couples get stuck with their own disappointment in what they didn't get, that I can't get some people beyond, like, get over yourself is what I end up
Yeah.
telling them. And I have enough of a close relationship where I can be like, I need you to stop whining and get over yourself. You're
Yeah.
focused on yourself too much. So when you have a couple that is, maybe they're there saying they want to do the work, but they can't push past what they want, what are some, what do we tell those people?
Yeah, well, sometimes you got to get real, like you do, because sometimes for mine too, they're in the past, right?
Mhm.
The trust is gone and they're in the past, and I think they're going to do this again just for digs. They're just doing this out of spite, right? And so, you really have to have them look at the lens. Okay, did they do everything out of spite in your entire relationship? What are some things? So I always bring it back to what where is the life here? What tell me about a time when things were going well, right? And I veer away from the all the negative, negative, negative. But then I still have no trouble saying to them, okay, so this is how you're feeling about this right now. How long would you like to feel like that?
Mm,
Simple. It's a
love it.
choice. It's a
Mhm.
choice. You want to stay back there, or do you want to move forward for the benefit of your children? It's a simple question. How
Yeah.
long do you want to stay there in that place of hurt and abandonment and lack of trust, and you know what you focus on grows,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So then if you're going to go into this communication or this 10 weeks with me because it was court ordered, right, just to poo poo everything, sorry, no, that's
Yeah.
not, this is about making lasting change for, and I always bring it back to the child. Always
Yes.
bring it back to the child, because that's what's going to benefit the child.
Yeah. Okay, perfect pivot point. Let's talk about the child. So, how do you find, how do I word this question? I have found that a lot of parents are, I don't know if oblivious is fair, but just I know just not paying enough attention to how their behavior trickles down and impacts their children. So when you have a couple that is maybe, obviously if they're very obviously fighting and yelling at each other, of course, but it's the more subtle stuff. The parents aren't speaking to each other. The parents are short with each other. They don't show any affection in front of the children. So how do you, I guess I'm kind of looking at, if we look at this from the perspective of the kid, what do we want parents to know about how their behavior impacts their children? I know it's a very basic question, but it's such a
It's not.
complicated one.
It is. It is. And I think what parents don't realize is that it's not about, like you said, what is said in the house.
Mm.
Especially children under 7 have even more heightened feelings of just a knowingness. It's kind of the situation you kind of described is kind of how I was brought up
Mm.
with my parents. So my mother was a nurse, my father was a teacher, and there wasn't any outward fighting in the home. Everybody just kind of did their thing, but there was no affection. And there was, that feeling of energy of this isn't really a loving environment. I mean, I remember I could still hear it to this day, my father going, Georgina, right? And I could feel the energy behind that. He might as well have been saying, Georgina, you're stupid. What are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so that did affect my relationships growing up because I didn't know what it was like to be and to see a loving relationship. So then I become a teenager, and do you think I'm picking the right guys?
Mm.
No, I'm picking the ones that are, let's not even go there. That's the topic
Yeah.
of book 2. Um, but it has a huge effect. Everything your children see and hear is writing on the slate of who they are. Oprah said it, Dr. Phil said it,
Mm.
and so your kids are watching you every move, and you're building the programs in them of how they will walk around in the world. Is so look at yourself and what's happening. Is this how you want your children to walk around in the world?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's such a great topic that I think even just us talking about it right now, I'm like, man, I want to focus on that. I want to do more episodes on that because I feel like we don't, I don't know, kids are resilient. We all know that. But that
Mm,
doesn't mean that they should have to be. Like, it doesn't mean that we should put them through that. And it doesn't mean that we should just expect them to course correct at some point on their own because they can't. And I do find that in a lot of the parents and the couples that I work with, and just individuals, um, it's hard when you have so much of your own stuff going on. It just is hard to see from someone else's, from your child's perspective. And I think that we don't realize, a lot of parents don't realize how much their kids pay attention. And like you said, under 7, they're just the way they're impacted is very different.
mhm.
And it's almost like for a lot of parents, it's like, well, I don't care, they're a child and they're just going to have to get over it. And I've heard parents say something to that effect of too freaking bad, essentially. Right. And that
Mhm.
breaks my heart because I feel like, why? Like they didn't choose to come into this situation. We are responsible for everything
Yeah.
until they are adults, essentially. And yes, we get to a point, choice, right, wrong, of course. I'm not saying that we're responsible for all their behaviors. I'm just saying we set the tone and we
Mhm.
don't get to be hypocrites and
We
then
give
get
it
mad at our
permission.
kids. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, that's why I moved from working with kids to working with parents because we got to deal with our own stuff. I mean, when I became a parent, it brought out all the trauma from losing my own parents. And, I mean, here's the thing. I don't want anybody to think, oh, well, they're just trying to tell us to be perfect parents. And that
Right.
doesn't exist.
Nope.
That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is have that same compassion that I said to have for your partner, have that same compassion for yourself.
Mhm.
Be aware that there is no such thing as a perfect parent, but it comes down to what are your priorities and what do you value and what do you want for your daily life, for this 20 plus year journey of parenting. Do you want to be full of yelling and strife and stress and no, nobody wants that. How do you want it to be? And look at it within and say, okay, what am I bringing to this? What's the partner bringing to this? And what are some things that we can tweak? What are our priorities and values here?
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that's a missing in the whole parenting realm because, and I got to bring it up, we're going to do another episode on it, the technology. I
Yes.
love technology. It's amazing. It's helping us do this right now. But one thing I'll say to parents is, whose values do you want your child to have?
Yes.
Yours or big tech's?
Hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So, you
Oh,
know,
we have so much to talk when we do that episode to come to be continued on that one. And it's
yeah.
true. I think that because parents are not just parents, they also work and they also have all these other, responsibilities and whatever. And you're not always just a parent to one child, right? And so sometimes we are relieved when the child is able to just get distracted at another friend's house or with technology or whatever. But we forget that we have to still be involved, well, even with the other parent, right? And so for your situation, working with couples, with co-parents, the kid goes to the other parent, whether they live in your house or not, right? Whether this is a split home situation or an in-home situation, and the kid may still get two very different messages about values, about morals, or just opinions and beliefs. And you have to figure out how to have a united front of sorts, even if you and your spouse or your ex-spouse disagree.
Mm-hmm.
You have to figure out, but as parents, how are
That's
we going to present to our children? Because we may be on very different ends of the spectrum, say religiously or politically, but our goal is not to win our child's, get them on our side. It's to make sure our child is equipped to think well, to, discern right from wrong, all the things. And so we need to be careful not to just push our own agenda, rather work with this other parent to make sure we are teaching the child what the child can what they need, keeping in mind developmental differences, right? So you might have two kids in the home, but one is on level developmentally, maybe the other one is not. Maybe there's a developmental delay or emotional delay or something. You have to be able to work together as parents to address those needs. But so many parents get caught up in the, well, this is how I was raised, and that's we're too hard, or we're too soft, or whatever. The nuance matters. Like, have a conversation about the child. What does this child need for me? The same way that we were saying, like, what do I need? Or
that's
what
right.
does my spouse need? What does our child need? And how do we provide that? And then I'm going to throw in one other point because I want to get your thoughts on this. Going back to your self-care, I've had a lot of parents, and honestly, especially moms, who are so overwhelmed with whatever they've got in their lives that they end up just kind of putting on the face of, I'm okay because I don't want my kid to see me struggle. But then what happens is that because they're touched out or just overwhelmed, they are kind of not fully present. And then they snap at the kid that's just too much, or I've been, and so it goes back to pretending you're okay is not okay.
It is
Your
not.
kid can see right through that.
Absolutely.
All right, on to
Absolutely.
you. What do you think?
Well, I mean, in a situation like that, mom has to really look at other ways of self-care that are not often talked about, which one of those things is how to say no. A
Mm.
mom that there you can always find some time. You're going to have to step back and not do some things. Maybe you don't drive to soccer this week. You call somebody else in the neighborhood and get over your pride with that, right? Doing
Or
all
your
the
guilt,
things, your
right?
guilt. Oh
Yes.
yeah, like right, like being a perfect mom isn't driving everywhere and having the cupcakes for the school fair, whatever. Like it has nothing really to do with any of that. So that mom has to really look inside and say, where is my value coming from? Is my value coming from all of these things that I'm doing for my children and all these other people, or do I value myself enough to take 30 minutes a day for myself, doing whatever that is, whatever works for you? I'm a big fan of meditation and journaling, but everybody does their own thing, right? Maybe it is painting your toenails. Hey, go for it. Whatever. If it makes you feel good, do it. But I really know that after spending 30 minutes doing something that makes you feel good, you're going to be less apt to be snapping on the children, right? And less apt to have that mask on that you're not really doing well, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I know there's no time in the day. You're talking to someone that, raised two kids and at one point substitute teaching and running two businesses at the same time with no help, no family help, no parents help, right? So I get it that there's not a lot of time, right?
Yep.
I totally get that. But at one point in my, parenting career, my meditation was washing the dishes at the end of the day.
Yes.
Right? The
See,
bubbles,
creative. Oh my gosh, you
the
get me.
bubbles, the warm water, right? Like that was because there was no other time. So I had to make a conscious choice every day. What am I going to do Now, were the dishes like my favorite thing to do? No, but how I looked at that was, man, I'm going to feel good when all these sippy cups and everything are washed and dried first thing in the morning when I wake up. Right?
Yeah,
So it was like
perspective. Yeah,
perspective on the end goal was like, yep,
I love it.
this is making me feel good right now.
Yeah.
This soap
And
on
you
my
know,
hands.
one of the reasons that I am so glad that you are who you are is because when you're sitting in front of a couple that's giving you all the reasons why they can't find
Mhm.
time, you can look at them and say, that's just an excuse. No,
Yep.
you do not have the time. You have to make the time.
Yep.
And they can't look at you and say, well, you don't know what it's like. You're like, no, I actually do. Now I'm not in your shoes and I'm not in your exact situation, but I know what it's like to not have the time and to have to make the time and to have no support. Like, and that's what we as I mean, like, as people, we're all guilty of is we all make excuses, right? It's just human nature and that's okay. But that's what self-awareness is about, is being able to recognize, okay, I'm making an excuse for myself because I don't want to have to be responsible and I don't want there's no one else to blame for me not doing this
Right?
thing. So it's nice to make an excuse, but at the end of the day, the excuse doesn't help us feel better. It just kicks the can, And so
Yeah.
being able to face ourselves as our number one obstacles is where we start. And then being able to say, it's okay that I'm not a perfect parent. It's okay that I have to apologize to my children sometimes or my spouse
Yeah.
to say, hey, I haven't been my best self. Here's what I'm going to try to do about it. I would really appreciate your support with this. And sometimes we say that to our kids, like, hey, look, I can't come to practice today because if I go to practice, I think I'm going to be way too tired to be a fun mom afterwards. So I'm
Mhm.
going to let neighbor friend take you because when you come back, I want to have so much fun with you. I want us to play a game and I want us to be able, like, the kid would enjoy that so much more than you just
Absolutely.
physically being there, but not being there. Right. And so I think it's just recognizing in ourselves that just because it's the way we've done it doesn't mean it's the right way. And it's okay that someone else teaches us a better way to do it.
Yeah, and come down to your priorities and values too, right? You have to make yourself a priority. So if you're
Yes.
not making yourself a priority, right, then have to look at what are you valuing yourself, right? It comes down to self-esteem and all of those things. Every parent that's listening, what do you want for your child?
Yeah.
High self-esteem, self-worth, feeling good, ready to take on the world, follow their passions, follow their dreams. Guess what? We have to do it first
Yes,
and show them
ma'am.
the way.
I love it. All right. So I'm going to wrap us up. So before we go, tell us a little bit, because you and I are like already have our next
Little
idea. So
sisters.
yes, girl,
It's
here we go.
hilarious.
So we're going to schedule our next one. We're going to do some screen time conversation. We have a few. So your face will become very known. Okay. So tell us before we go, where can people find you to learn more about your coaching services and just all the amazing things that you do?
Yeah, all the things, my everything, my whole life is basically wrapped up on my website, nataliemccabe.com.
Perfect.
So there's some blogs on there. People can download the first chapter of my book. It's called Sink or Swim Parenting. It won't be coming out till later in the year, but it's at the publisher now, so we're doing all that stuff.
Yay.
Um,
Good.
and then it describes the parent coaching. Right now, I'm just doing one-on-one sessions, but I'm looking at in the next few months to be growing do a group coaching. A plan on a group coaching specifically for self-care.
Beautiful.
I'm going to call that the art of extreme self-care. And then, I'd also do group coaching for parents as well. So yeah, so they
I
can
love it.
find out everything, my history and story and qualification, everything's on the website.
Perfect. Okay, I'll link to it in the show notes. And then let me think. There was something else I was going to ask you. I just forgot about it. It's gone. Oh, the self-care you're going to do, is it going to be specific to, is it open to anyone, whether they're married, not
Yep,
married? Okay.
absolutely. And my coaching is open to anyone, married or not
Okay.
married, couples, I
Yeah.
mean, they just say when you go into the parenting business, you should have a niche, right?
Yeah.
And so, of course, I chose this niche
Yeah.
because I lived this niche.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've, you know, I'll coach anybody with any
Yeah.
from toddlers to teens, right?
Yes. And like we were saying, all the things that you apply to the co-parents, we were very easily to apply it to the married parents,
Yes. Well, I
because it's
mean,
the same
that's
strategies.
exactly. They're all the same strategies that, I
Right.
mean, these strategies from my course, right? That
Yeah.
they were meant for parents that were together, and I'm just applying them to co-parents, but they're just universally good strategies.
Yeah.
Like I
I
said,
love it.
Parent Coaching Institute is another shout out to them. I'll tell you, really amazing training for
That's
sure.
great. Okay, Natalie, thank you so much. I'm excited about our next time. And then to be continued, I'll talk to you soon.
Yes. All
All
right.
right.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.